Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us this week. I'm Brian McElhatton. Let's go inside Utah politics right now. Our first guest today is Caroline Gleich, Democratic candidate for Utah's U.S. Senate race. Caroline, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So last time you were here, you were gearing up for all the conventions and you're doing a lot of campaigning. Well, you've gone through the county conventions and you went through the state convention for the first time. What was that like?
It was really exciting, the opportunity to travel across the state and to meet with Utahns and to hear from folks in 10 different counties. It was really wonderful, and I love any opportunity I can to travel our state and to see new places and revisit certain places and, yeah, to connect with folks.
What's the pace like? I mean, it's got to be exhausting to travel and meet so many people, right?
Yeah, it's definitely been an adjustment. Just like anything, when you get into running, you got to build your endurance slowly. And so with this whole process, I feel I've been adapting to the different pace of life, but I really enjoy the challenge and it's fun. It's bringing some of the same mentality that I've used as an athlete to this campaign. I've really enjoyed it, and it was a wild ride because our state is the size of England. So getting to all these county conventions at times would represent a real logistical challenge of doing, usually it was 2 per night on Tuesday nights and then 2 per night on 2 on Saturdays. So it was really intense, but I also really enjoyed it.
Yeah, what have you learned from doing all of that?
Yeah, I really had a great opportunity to work on my speech, but also to connect with people and to hear about the most pressing issues facing Utahns. And to connect with folks, you know, in our rural communities too. It was great to hear what they're looking for in jobs and in life. And really, my biggest takeaway is how hungry Utahns are for a change of leadership, for new leaders to step up, and to have that call that Mitt Romney said when he announced he was retiring, for the next generation of leaders to step up.
Well, what was very interesting as I was doing some research is the New York Times called your campaign one of the top 10 campaigns to watch in the country this year. That's quite a shout out from the New York Times, right?
Yeah, we were really excited to have our campaign mentioned and to put Utah on the map as a more competitive state, because our demographics in Utah really are changing. We're the youngest state in the nation, we're the fastest growing state in the nation, and we really deserve to have a U.S. Senator that represents the voices of youth.
Mm-hmm. Of course, you've got major challenges on the Republican side of things. They've got the primary coming up. John Curtis is leading the pack so far, according to the polls. A big name, a guy who's been established in politics for a long time now. How do you message and how do you reach voters in a state that is definitely not a swing state, right?
Yeah. Overwhelmingly, what I've heard from Utahns and what Americans are feeling is this real discontent with the state of politics right now. People are not happy, and we have one of the least productive Congresses in U.S. history. If we want to change politics, we need to change the people that we are sending to be our politicians. And I'm excited to do just that, to give voters a really great choice on the ballot this November and to advocate for the future of Utah that we all want and need.
So one of the issues that you talk about a lot is climate change and clean energy and what that means for Utah and the future of the power that we have here. A few weeks ago, we had the Secretary of Energy on this program. We talked a little bit about the transition from fossil fuels to cleaner fuels, right? But there's disagreement in Utah about how to do that. You hear a lot about government overreach, people concerned about regulations from the EPA and Department of Energy. Where do you see clean energy in our state? How do you see us transitioning to that, but doing so in a way that is balanced and protects jobs? Because that's an important concern here.
Yeah. One of my big concerns right now is that Utah is getting left behind and that our state is not on the right track, especially with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act 2 years ago, which is the largest climate bill in United States history. There are billions of dollars available to help states like Utah accelerate our transition to clean, renewable energy. And I want to make sure that we're not left behind, that we're not leaving the workers behind, and that we are not keeping people in a climate with bad air, the health effects from that, and contributing to the acceleration of the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. So I would love to help be that voice to help us secure federal funding and to really help empower workers and everyday Utahns, because overwhelmingly transitioning to more clean, renewable energy creates jobs. It's healthier for our air and water, and it's cheaper.
I want to ask you about something. This is definitely the Women in Politics episode that we have this week. We're going to have State Representative Angela Romero on later, Wendy Davis, talking about their experience as women in politics, running for office, holding office. And I want to ask you what your experience has been like as a woman. What kind of comments have you faced? What kind of opposition have you faced that men don't typically have to worry about?
Well, thank you so much for that question, because there's a real challenge we have as a country with likability of women leaders. There's a study that shows the day you file your candidacy as a woman, your likability instantly decreases. And as a young woman and a petite woman, I've really faced this double bind and this challenge of frankly, sexism and misogyny. There's just a lot of people that don't want to hear women's voices, and there's a particular challenge here in Utah where we are consistently rated one of the worst states in the nation for gender equity. And that's a measure of looking at the gender pay gap, women in leadership positions, and things like the maternal mortality rate, or how many women die giving birth. We have one of the highest rates of maternal mortality in the United States. And women here, it's a big uphill battle. I think it's very important that we have more women in our elected positions and in government, because when women lead, we see better policy for families, for everyone, and that stuff really trickles to every aspect of society.
We talked briefly before the show about comments that you get. You said you try not to read the comments, the hateful comments, right? Because they come in unsolicited, and women in the TV news business face it all the time too. And I wonder what you would say to other women who are considering getting into politics or another aspect of civic life, who are turned off by that, who say, I don't want to deal with that at all, I'm out.
To the women out there, and for folks from different backgrounds, young folks, everyone who doesn't see themselves represented in government, I would say, run for office. We need you. We need you more than ever. Whatever your background is, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're an athlete, you work at the grocery store, we need you in politics to help lead our state and our country. And when it comes to the comments, I would really have a call to action for the men, because largely the people that are sending these hateful, misogynistic comments online, they're men. I would say, look inside at what it is that is triggering that. Hold back when you're getting ready to type, and figure out what it is, your own unmet need, because a lot of the things that we criticize in other people are really things we're deeply unsatisfied with in ourselves. So I would encourage folks to pause on sending that response on Twitter or on Instagram, and instead take that time to do some self-reflection.
That's very good, because you can get behind that keyboard warrior mentality, and it's easy to send a message without thinking about it. And with social media, we're connected 24/7 now.
Yes, and those comments, they have a real harmful effect on especially our young people. We have a real crisis in our country and in our state with mental health of our teenagers. And so the more that people can lead with kindness and love and hold back that hate, I think we would all be better off.
So you're gearing up now for the general election. We've got a few months to go in November. It's going to be here really fast, right? How does the campaign shift now that you've got through the conventions? Now you're in general election mode. What does the campaign look like for you now?
Yeah, it's been really exciting to build up our team and our resources, and to really be focused on how we're going to register new voters and engage young voters to become lifelong voters. And that's the part that I'm really excited about, is inviting people to participate in the process. Because there's a lot of studies that show that when someone starts voting at a young age, they're a voter for life. So I'm so excited to give Utahns the opportunity and to run a competitive race where we have a strong candidate at the top of the ticket. And I'm also working really hard to support down ballot candidates, and especially women for our state legislature. We really would love to see more women in our state legislature, at the city and county levels for those seats too. And so I'm really excited about the challenge we have to bring new people into the process and to give folks a new option, and to really fulfill Senator Romney's call for the next generation of leaders to step up.
Carolyn Gleich, glad to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. We'll be following you for sure. Thank you. Still ahead on Inside Utah Politics this week, protesters against the war in Gaza forced out of a Senate hearing on Israel. Senators are divided right now on how the U.S. is handling the issue. What Secretary of State Antony Blinken had to say from the hot seat. We'll be right back. Hundreds of thousands of veterans are getting help from the VA for toxic exposure. That's according to the Biden administration. President Biden is in New Hampshire this week to tout the 1 million claims his administration has granted since passage of the PACT Act. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Hannah Brandt has that story.
1 million.
That's the number of claims President Biden says the Veterans Administration has approved since the PACT Act was passed in August of 2022. The law is meant to help veterans get critical benefits if they've been exposed to toxins while serving.
We continue to work around the clock to get veterans benefits they deserve and get them now.
But there's an important gap.
There are more than 4 million claims that have been submitted by veterans. So why are so many veterans not getting the help that they've been asking for?
Well, we've actually reduced the backlog by more than 100,000 since December and January. And in fact, we are delivering more benefits to more veterans than at any other time in our history.
Though VA Undersecretary for Benefits Joshua Jacobs tells me there's still a lot of work left.
We are certainly not stopping here. We have much more to do.
President Biden says this issue is especially meaningful to him because he believes the cancer that killed his son, Beau Biden, was caused by exposure to burn pits during his military service.
My son Beau was one of those veterans. So this is personal to me and my family.
And both the president and the VA are encouraging more veterans and survivors to apply for PACT Act benefits.
In America, we leave no veteran behind. That's the motto.
The VA says from the claims they've approved so far, they've given out $5.7 billion in benefits to people in all 50 states. In Washington, I'm Hannah Brandt.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in the hot seat this week as he testified before the Senate and faced questions about U.S. policy toward Israel. All of that comes as tensions between the two countries remain high after the U.S. held a shipment of weapons over Israel's plans to invade Rafah. There's also some uncertainty here following the death of Iran's president. Our Washington correspondent Basil John shows us the questions that Blinken faced.
Police carried protesters out of a Senate hearing as Secretary of State Antony Blinken faced pressure over the administration's handling of the war between Israel and Hamas.
We're standing with Israel in its efforts to ensure that what happened on October 7th never happens again, as we do everything we can to bring an end to the terrible human suffering in Gaza.
But the protesters aren't the only ones who are upset.
Is the president going to stand by his red line?
The administration is imposing costs on Israel.
Idaho Republican Senator James Risch criticized the administration for punishing Israel by pausing a weapons shipment.
You must stop blaming Israel and let Israel remove Hamas from Gaza. That is the only way to move forward.
And Democrats like Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen are disappointed the administration does not acknowledge that the Israeli government failed to comply with international law.
Mr. Secretary, that hurts our credibility around the world, and it sets a dangerously low bar for what's acceptable going forward.
The International Criminal Court applied for arrest warrants against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and some Hamas leaders. Blinken says the U.S. stands against it.
The shameful equivalence implied between Hamas and the leadership of Israel, I think that only complicates the prospects for getting such an agreement.
That was Basil John reporting. Blinken was also asked by Texas Senator Ted Cruz if the world is better now that Iran's president is dead. Blinken said yes, and that the Iranian people are probably better off. Still to come from us here today, Representative Angela Romero and political scientist Wendy Davis joins us to talk about women in Utah politics. Hear the experiences they're sharing that could help future leaders. Welcome back, everyone. Joining us now, State Representative and Minority Leader Angela Romero and Wendy Davis, political scientist, author, former candidate. We're talking women in politics this week and the challenges they face, and I'm so eager to talk with you both. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so we just talked to Caroline Gleich in a previous segment, and she was telling us what it's like as a woman running for office, the comments that come in, and the way questions are framed. And she wishes there was more mental health support for candidates, because I don't think she was expecting all of that. But now, as you are, she's all too familiar. Representative Romero, let me start with you and what that's like, the keyboard warriors, the comments. What is it like for you as a woman to deal with those things that men don't necessarily have to deal with?
It's frustrating at times because people make assumptions about you. They say things about you, and of course, after a segment like this, someone will say, why don't you lose weight, or you're wearing too much makeup, and they don't really focus on substance. It's just artificial. And it's unfortunate that we couldn't just be judged for the policy stances we have versus being called names.
What do you think gets in someone's mind to make them want to engage in that kind of behavior to begin with? Because they wouldn't necessarily say it in person to you, right? Or would they?
Who knows? Because we don't know who they are half of the time because they hide behind a keyboard. And I would hope they wouldn't say that to anyone in person, but this is the world we live in today, and it's unfortunate.
Wendy Davis, you talked to some candidates and some people in politics about their experiences with this. One of the interesting things you asked them about was the way issues are framed when women are asked about an issue as opposed to the way that person might ask a man. What did you learn about that conversation?
Yeah, I can share a little bit about my own experience and then also what I've heard from some candidates. When I was knocking doors in 2020, one of the time periods was during the Amy Coney Bryant confirmation hearing for Supreme Court Justice. And I would have the door opened to me and immediately ask me my views on reproductive rights. And I was like, whoa, is that because I'm a woman? I don't know if it was because I was a woman or not, but it puts you in immediately a defensive position and also challenges you to have an opinion about that, which really, you know, may or may not be relevant to something that you want to talk about. But oftentimes those issues, when people disagree with you on that, starts to turn into an ad hominem comment or a personal comment. And like Representative Romero said, a lot of candidates, they get challenged. Perhaps they're not in favor of book banning, and then they get called a groomer or a pedophile, and then it will turn to almost inevitably something about your physical appearance. It's very interesting but predictable.
Because no one's asking the men in office or the male candidates, hey, I hate your suit. I don't like the makeup you have on camera today, right? But they're asking you.
I mean, men also get attacked, but I think women are more in the front line of that. I mean, I think my favorite word is Marxist Democrat, and I'm like, how can I be a Democrat and Marxist? I love that term.
What's it like serving in office overwhelmingly with a group of men? Do you run into similar situations?
You know, I don't really see it as a barrier because I'm very direct and upfront, but I know it exists, and so you just have to have those honest conversations with people. And when I'm in a situation, and this has been a situation, I'm the leader of my caucus, and so people will call me representative, but they'll call the speaker, speaker. And so every time they call him speaker and they call me representative, I will correct them and say, Leader Romero, Speaker Schultz.
Interesting. What does that do to
Or they call me by my first name. Many times I'm in situations where people will call me by my first name, but they'll call my male colleagues by their title.
So psychologically, does that just grind on you? And what does it do to you mentally?
I don't know if it necessarily grinds on me. I grew up in Utah, not of the predominant religion, and obviously I'm Hispanic. So these are encounters I've had ever since I was a child, from being called names or told to go back home, even though my family's always existed in these territories, or just because I wasn't part of the predominant religion, kids wouldn't play with me. So I understand what it is to face these obstacles, and so I think for me, I'm going to just show you that I'm not who you say I am.
I'm so sorry you deal with this. I mean, let me ask you this. Women who are watching this right now, who are interested in running for office, regardless of party, regardless of the office, could be school board, could be state senate. They hear stories like this, and maybe they worry, gosh, I don't want to deal with that at all at that level. What would you say to them if they're interested in getting into politics?
I say run. Women always question whether they should run. Men, on the other hand, and this is studies, this is not just me making it up, they just say, I'm going to run. And so it's up to us as women leaders to encourage other women to run. We may not have to, like, when it comes to, like, policy, there are a lot of women in my chamber that I don't agree with, but I still respect them as a person. And if someone attacks them for their physical appearance, I will be the first one to step up and fight back for them. So that shouldn't be why you're running for office. You should run for office because you believe that you can create change for the community. So I think if anyone's out there, that there are women out here who are willing to help you, and there are also men out here who are willing to help you as well.
Wendy Davis, I want to ask you about your experience. You got into the race. You chose to run. Did anyone prepare you for this type of misogyny when you were running?
No, well, you know, as a woman in society, you experience all kinds of things. And, you know, women have been fighting for equal rights, equal pay, to have their voices heard. And thank heavens there are women decades and decades before Representative Romero and myself who have made the way easier. And so we're experiencing that benefit in some way. But there's nothing that really prepares you. I want to agree with Representative Romero. Women need to run. We need moms. We need working people. We need people out there, women of color. We need men too. There's lots of them. But the stronger we are with respect to our differences, I think will make our representation stronger as well.
Do you think women are discouraged from either by themselves intrinsically or by others when they think about running for office? I mean, obviously we have way more men running for office than we do women. How do we change that?
By showing who the leaders are, by encouraging more women to run. And there are women of all persuasions here in Utah. So there are women that people just assume women don't run because they have children. Not every woman wants to have a child. And so I think it's really about getting rid of some of those barriers for women. And as I say that, I'm just looking forward to the comments that will be made about me by saying some women don't want to have children. But that is an issue that women face as well, is people stereotype them when they see that they may not be married or they don't have children, so they make judgments on them, and that's unfortunate. We see this happen all the time to women.
Oh my goodness. And one more point that I want to hit. Wendy, you were talking about what it's like campaigning and safety issues that come to play there. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, sure. You know, I saw a real difference between 2020 and 2022, and I've continued to be involved with several campaigns over the last couple of years, and especially on social issues, whether it's reproductive rights or the transgender bathroom issues or banning books. I don't know that that's a social issue, but people are getting more aggressive in their beliefs and threatening, sometimes actual physical threats. But listen, almost all voters are delightful, but it's those couple of times you only need to be threatened once to really have it shake you to your core. And so the candidates that I get to advise, I advise them to go out in pairs, to have a buddy, to be in sightline, to have a way out of a conversation if it gets confrontational, to have a plan, and just be together and you know, have someone to go with you. I want candidates to knock doors, but just be aware that there can be threatening behavior, threatening comments, and sometimes it gets so serious every once in a while that law enforcement is involved. That's very rare, but it does happen.
Do you think the parties support the candidates enough to this end, to this degree, to help them out with these things?
I think at times the parties don't think about it. They have different candidates, different people running, and so it's really up to all of us to make sure that women are safe. Again, if you look at Utah's sexual assault rates, rape is higher than the national average here in Utah. And so there is a reason why women have to be a little bit more careful because of what exists in our society. Unfortunately, we have to have other safeguards. And so this is something that we've explored. I know with our party, some of us have talked about it, but there are a lot of candidates. There are so many volunteers, so it's really up to the campaign. So it should be added into the training. But I can tell you, when women are elected, they bring different issues to the table. We have a daycare desert here in Utah. We don't have enough daycare providers. And the #1 issue that all Utahns are concerned about, whether they're a woman, whether they're a man, whether they're older, whether they're younger, is housing accessibility. And they don't trust their elected officials anymore. 62% of Utahns have concerns with their elected officials not listening to them. So regardless if you're a woman or if you're a man, we as elected officials, people running for office, need to really listen to the people.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Leader Romero, Representative Romero, thank you so much for being here. Wendy Davis, absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much. Stay with us, everybody. More Inside Utah Politics coming up right after this. All right, that does it for this edition of Inside Utah Politics. Don't forget, if you have any local political stories you'd like to see or someone I should talk to, reach out, would you? You can email us, InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow along with me on social media. On X, it's Brian Reports, and on Instagram, search for Brian McElhatton. We'll talk to you then. And find ABC4 on social media to follow along no matter where you are. And while you're at it, download the ABC4 News app. We are always on. Thanks for being with us, everybody. We will see you back here next time. Goodbye.